he was up on a ladder. But he informed the man that there weren't any campsites nearby, but that if he headed down the road about 4 miles, he'd find one at another park. He asked if he could be of any other help, but the man said no and thanked him. My friend said he kept painting, but he was listening and never heard the man leave. The second he came up and talked to me, the hairs on my neck stood up, but I wasn't sure why. I just had this really uneasy feeling about the whole thing, and I wanted to finish painting and get out of there. I figured maybe part of it was that I couldn't turn around to look at him, but something just felt off. There was also this weird smell floating around even before the guy talked to me, kind of like old menstrual blood. I had looked around to see what was causing it, but I didn't find anything, so I waited for the guy to walk away, but I didn't hear him leave, which made me think he was just standing there and watching me. So I asked again if I could do anything for him, and he didn't answer. I knew he was there though, because I hadn't heard him leave, so I did this awkward turn on the ladder to look down and see what he was doing. Now, I admit it could have just been my brain messing up, but I swear to you, for a split second when I turned around, he didn't have a face. Like, he had no face. It was almost concave and totally smooth, and I just about had a heart attack because I couldn't even wrap my brain around what I was seeing. I think I started to say something, but there was this kind of pop inside my head, and suddenly he was just a normal-looking guy. I must have looked weird because he asked me if I was okay, and I was just like, yeah, I'm fine. He asked about the campsite again, and I point to where he has to go, and he's like, I'm not from around here, can you help me get there? Now this is when I know something is really up, because there's no way this guy got out here and didn't know where he was. And for that matter, there's no car around, so how'd he get here in the first place? I said I was sorry, but I couldn't take him anywhere in the company vehicle. And he's like, please, I really don't know where I am. Can you come with me? Help me get there. So now I'm seriously weirded out, and I start wondering if this is some kind of ambush or whatever. I told him I could call him a taxi to come out and take him where he wants to go, and I pull out my phone, and he just goes no and walks away really quickly. But he doesn't walk out of the park. He walks back into the trees, and I got right in my truck and started to get out of there. It was screw the paint. I looked in my mirror to see where he was as I was leaving, and he was standing right at the tree line again. I don't know how he got there so fast, but this time I know that he didn't have a face. He was just watching me leave, and right before I turned the corner, he took a big step back into the trees and kind of dissolved, I guess. Maybe it was just dark, so he blended in, but it felt more like he just melted away. You know, actually, I had something sort of weird like that happen a while back. I was out doing some trail scouting, and I was out in the middle of nowhere figuring out we were going to have this trail run through. I hadn't seen anyone else for probably a good 2 hours, so I wasn't really paying attention to where I was going. I was just looking at the ground for the most part. Then out of nowhere, I crested this little hill and almost ran into this guy. He was older, probably in his 60s, and I started to apologize to him for running into him. And then I noticed his face, and I probably looked like a complete douchebag because I stopped and just stared at him. It took me a second to figure out what was wrong, but this guy's face was huge. I know that sounds weird, but that's the only way I can describe it. His head wasn't big or anything, it was normal, but the amount of space his face took up was just way too much. Like if you took someone's face and enlarged it all by about 2 times. He doesn't say anything, just kind of looks at me. So I backed up and was kind of stuttering, saying I was sorry. I went around him and got out of there and did what I needed to do. The whole time I kept looking behind me because I was so freaked out that he'd pop up behind me or something. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I swear to you, it was one of the creepiest things I've ever seen. A couple years ago, I went camping with my girlfriend about 2 miles from the road at this site I know. We went to bed that night, but we couldn't sleep because we kept hearing that grinding noise. My brother used to grind his teeth in his sleep, and it kind of reminded me of that. My girlfriend was freaking out, but I just kept telling her to ignore it because I've heard it before, and you just have to ignore it. It goes away eventually, you know what I mean. So eventually I got her to go to sleep, but I woke up probably 2 hours later because something was just off. I rolled over and she wasn't there. I kind of edge of the camp, looking at something in the trees, and I could see that she was really pale. The fire was low, but bright enough to see her. I ran up to see what was going on. She was dead asleep, but her eyes were open. She had this real spaced-out look, So I put my arm around her to lead her back, but she wouldn't move. She just said really quietly something like, "I have to go now, Eddie. I have to go. It's here." And I was like, "You're just sleepwalking. Come back to bed." But she wouldn't budge. She just kept standing there, saying she had to go. And I looked where she was looking, and there was a staircase right about 15 yards away. Gray one, concrete. And she started to walk toward it, but I yanked her back, and that woke her up. She looked at me like I was out of my mind, and she asked what she was doing out of the tent. I didn't tell her anything. I just told her she was sleepwalking. The grinding noise was gone, so she just went back to the tent with me and fell asleep again. Do you remember the second story from part 6 of this series, the fellow with Down syndrome? Well, first of all, he talked about the stairs. He said he'd been watching his dad build a fire, and the stairs came up to him. He said he had to go up them, or something bad would happen. The cops couldn't really understand what he was talking about after that, because he just kept saying, like the campfire, over and over, and he kept mentioning sounds, but he couldn't say what sounds, just that it was loud, and he covered his ears so he couldn't hear them. But the thing I remember most is that they asked him where exactly he'd gone, and he just said he was right there. He kept pointing at himself, and they said they thought that meant that he never left. He said he wasn't scared because the stairs were there. He said they talked to him, but not like people talk. Like I said, it was really convoluted and hard to understand. I have a feeling the cops didn't take most of it down. They ended up just saying that the kid had some kind of amnesia or was in a fugue state. They didn't think foul play was involved, but it doesn't really explain why he came back a week later perfectly fine with a speck of dirt on him and well-fed. But hey, what the cops say goes. One story that's made the rounds here was about a young woman who disappeared upstate. Initially, everyone assumed she was a runaway. She didn't come from a great home life, so it really wasn't any kind of surprise that she chose to cut and run. But people started coming forward saying that they'd seen her around the park shortly before she vanished. So some of the rangers in the area were sent out to make sure she had hung herself or something on any of the back trails. It took them a while, but they did find her. Well, not all of her, just half of her tongue and a quarter of the lower jaw. Very clean cuts from what I heard. They never found the rest of her. So many stories of black-eyed people wandering around the woods and calling out in the night, mimicking the sound of running water or a bobcat screaming. One man in particular goes to every news station he thinks will listen to him and tells the same story. He was deer hunting, camped out in a very remote area, and he woke up because something was scraping against his tent. He thought it was a raccoon or a fox until the thing pressed its face against the door of the tent, at which point he could very clearly make out a human nose and mouth. He kicked at it, but it leaped back and was gone by the time he opened the tent flap, gun at his side. He fired 2 warning shots, and when the sound had faded, he heard a snap behind him. A man was standing at the edge of the campsite, not wearing any clothing, but he also didn't possess any kind of human flesh. As this hunter described it, the man was made of some kind of amalgamation of raw meat and hair, as if someone had scooped up roadkill, molded it into the vague shape of a man. The face was lumpy, and only a rough approximation of a human face. The thing opened its lopsided mouth, and from it came the sound of the gun the hunter had fired. It did this twice before mimicking the sound of the tent zipper and fleeing into the night. A young couple out for a hike in the rocky areas of my park reported to me yesterday that they had seen something strange out on a peak I'm very familiar with. They were taking turns looking through a pair of binoculars when the man noticed a hiker climbing up a very steep part of the cliff face. He watched the man scale the slope, and it didn't occur to him until the incident was over that this person had no climbing gear. reached the top of the peak, which was about 5 miles away, they turned and faced the young man. He said whoever or whatever this person was looking right at them. The climber waved in an exaggerated manner before snapping in half at the waist, sideways, and leaping off the peak. The young man didn't see where the climber landed. I sent them on their way with assurances that I'd check it out. I lied. I won't be turning in a report because there are 10 others exactly like it. The climber is well known in that area. I don't question it anymore. In response to a couple of other incidents at the same site at my park, we installed a camper near the entrance, and a ranger stays out there every night. We rotate, so everyone spends one night a week there. I chose Wednesdays, as these tend to be relatively low-key with only our long-term guys around. This particular day had been humid, like the inside of a locked car. All of us were relatively miserable, but the camper had a small AC unit, and the campers and I took turns sitting in it until the sun went down. We all bedded down, and I had the AC turned up as high as it would go. It's a loud unit, so I had earplugs in. The camper is tiny but comfortable. I fell asleep relatively quickly. I woke up in total silence. It took me a minute to realize that was the problem. The AC had stopped. There was absolutely no sound outside. I sat up, and the sheets didn't make any noise. I clapped, nothing. I yelled, nothing. This has happened to me before. I'm a firm believer that it's some kind of strange acoustical phenomenon, but I don't think it's caused by the wind. I got out of bed, yanked on my boots, and flew out the door. I ran to the edge of the campsite, about 500 feet away, and somewhere behind the trees there was something darker than the space around it. I headed for it, but I must have misjudged its distance because it took longer to get there than it should have. They'd split a tree in half. I've seen lightning do that a few times, but not this cleanly. This cut was surgical. The bushes underneath it had been crushed. I could faintly make out the shape of something furry. A raccoon, I suspected. The intestines bursting out of its eye sockets were already attracting flies. The stairs were concrete, old. I can make out the lines of graffiti on the lower steps. A metal handrail bowed out haphazardly. Most of the supports bent or gone. 10, maybe 12 steps. In a rush, the sound of the world came back, and I heard the faint electrical snap of a fly exploding near my ear. I sprinted back to camp. I grabbed the rifle out of the pickup I'd taken to the site, stood at the edge of camp, my back to the woods. I stood there and watched until the sun came up. I watched the whole camp, every tent. I know I never fell asleep, and no one came into. I'm on call 24 hours a day now. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but it pays the bills. Sometimes they let me leave early or take extra days off if I'm tired. There's not that much going on at night, of course, but occasionally one of us has to run out and deal with something. An animal sighting, a missing person, that sort of thing. All in all, I get called out about a dozen times a month for some kind of nighttime emergency. Generally, the calls go something like this. A text and a phone call from my boss. 15 minutes to get out the door dressed in my uniform. 30 to work, then anywhere from 5 minutes to 8 hours dealing with the issue. If it's a missing person or the cops are involved, up to 2 days without sleep. Sometimes I end up in the hospital with severe fatigue and dehydration. My boss knows I'll pick up as soon as he calls, but I don't always hear texts. Usually he'll text first in case I'm up, but otherwise he'll get me on the phone. He is the only one who contacts me in these situations. That's always been our system in the past. So you can imagine my surprise when I got a call from him at 2 in the morning and saw I had 70 missed texts from just about every single person in our department. Yeah, what's up? I said, sitting up. I'm great at faking being awake on the phone. Cleetwood Trail, South Entrance. It's bad. Don't worry about your clothes. Just get out there. He was breathing heavy, and he didn't wait for me to finish my greeting. What's up? I was concerned now. My boss is unflappable. Just get out there. It's bad. Of course, I immediately thought of one of our calls in the past. It took us days to find all the pieces of their skulls. How bad? Katie is on her way. Call when you figure it out. He hung up. He'd never sent another ranger up before me. I scrolled through the barrage of texts. Oh my gosh, Russ, what the hell is going on? Dude, I'm sorry, what's going on out there? Call me. Call boss right now. I threw my clothes on and was out the door in about 5 minutes. The drive took about 15 minutes going 90 on the freeway, and along the way my phone kept pinging notifications. I turned it off and tossed it in the back seat. When I got there, Katie was waiting for me. Something about her face was wrong, and in the non-existent light, I had to get close to her to see that she was wearing a respirator. The smell was like a wall. I ran into it about 5 feet from her and gagged. I took the respirator she handed me and strapped it on, coughing and doubled over. Bad, huh? She quipped, her voice muffled. She patted me on the back. Come on. I followed her into the forest, and even behind the filters I could still smell it. Believe me, it bothers me as much as it does anyone else when people say that something is indescribable, but I really do not know how to paint an accurate picture of what it smelled like. Imagine taking a fish and then filling it full of other dead fish, then put that stuffed fish in a bag made out of skin of even more dead fish, and leave that bag sitting in the sun for a few days. Sprinkle some halitosis and rotten grass on top of the bag, let it sit another few days. Now open that bag, stick your head in it, and take a nice deep breath. That should give you an idea of what it was smelling like half a mile away. It was hard to hear Katie through the respirator, so I didn't talk much when we were walking. Neither of us really wanted our mouths open anyway. I kept thinking about how smells are composed are particulate, and a few times I had to stop and lift the respirator, spit, and dry heave. Katie clapped me on the back, almost knocked me off balance, sending my spit flying. Gross, huh? She said, half shouting. Don't worry, it's only worse from here. I gave her a weak thumbs up, and we kept going. She'd taken the van with her on-site equipment inside, and she'd been there long enough to have carted a couple of portable spotlights to the scene. As we crested a hill, I could see them shining on something huge. The top of the thing crested out of the trees in places, a huge gray behemoth. I shot her a look, but she just grinned and waved me ahead. The smell was thick enough now to almost be visible, and something crunched under my feet. The robin I crushed was still alive, and it raised one wing weakly. I crushed its skull and moved on, but there were others. They remained where they'd fallen, their sides heaving, and an occasional wing raised and dropped. Smell got on my thing, Katie said, kicking a bird off the path. There's a raccoon up here, too. Took one bite and died. Come look. I stepped around the birds, and the light filtered through the trees, shining on their little oil drop eyes. The path straightened, and up ahead I could see the hulking thing, whatever it was, had fallen right across, about 300 yards ahead. I broke into a jog, and Katie kept pace. I went as close as I could until the smell was too much, and then I just stood while Katie kept going. She kicked the thing and spread her arms out, taking it all in. The way she illuminated it, only parts were really visible. It rose up, an impenetrable wall, and disappeared into the tops of the trees. The sporadic but careful lighting gave it an almost reverent quality, like an artifact on display. Either way I looked, the thing stretched into the dark. Katie walked the length of it to my right, until I could barely make her out in the dark. I craned my head up and could just see the edge where it curved and dipped back down. I forced myself closer to the rubbery surface of the thing. It was grayish, darker in the light, and the surface was scarred and stippled with white marks. Katie came back and walked down to the left. Come here, she called. I followed, not taking my eyes off the thing. We walked, her hand sometimes brushing the thing, and up ahead now I could see something sticking out of the side of the wall. Know what it is now. I could hear that she was grinning, enjoying the mystery. It was some kind of thick flap, huge, bigger than both of us combined. One side was attached to the thing. It hung to the ground where it rested in the dirt. At a place where the flap joined the wall, there were strange protrusions. Ignoring the smell, I looked closer now. There were many of them in various sizes, small, grainy craters. That's when the pieces fit together, and I backed off, stumbling over myself and almost falling into the dirt. Katie lifted the pectoral flipper with great effort. Can you imagine how strong they have to be to move these things? Wish it still had its tail. I ran forward and kept going until my head I could see some bacteria and decay. The mouth was slightly open, and the algae in the baleen was beginning to rot. Suddenly, there was a loud, wheezing exhale, and the thing moved just slightly. The mouth opened, showing more of the slimy, putrid baleen, and from somewhere far down the other end there was a creak and a thud I felt rather than heard. "Holy crap," Katie whispered. "Thought it died an hour ago. You feel that? It's still trying." The milky eye moved to look at me, and there was another weaker exhale. And as we stared at each other, the whale opened its mouth a little more, closed it, and died. The light left the blind eye, and the entire corpse sagged, letting off more of that horrific stench. Katie was still talking. "It's another of those clean cuts, right through the whole back of it. If you go around the other side, it's missing that fin and a big slice of its skin, but the tail's totally gone." I couldn't break away, couldn't stop looking into the cataract that was forming. All that bacteria now free to multiply and turn everything to liquid. Through the baleen, I could just make out the bulk of the tongue, and it was already losing color, already being eaten from the inside, and I ran as far away as I could before doubling over and vomiting. Katie came over and patted my back. When it was over, I wiped my mouth and put the respirator back on. Now I went back to the corpse and began walking the length of it, shutting off every light. I couldn't stand to see it lit so beautifully. "I honestly don't even know who to call," Katie said. Down at the other end, I could see the clean slice where the tail had been taken off. No boat propeller could have done it, but that was no surprise. I knew what had. I wonder how big they'd been, down there in the deepest dark where only whales could go. It answered a theory I've had for some time. The stares were impartial. Deep down in my gut, there was a glassy, obsidian panic that was so familiar now as to be unnoticeable except when more weight was added. Suddenly, more than anything, I wanted to be at home in the dark, and I told Katie who to call, what to do, so I could hand in my respirator and began to walk back to my truck. Never looking back at the corpse cresting the trees, the top of it growing its own forest of birds feasting. We'll leave it to rot. We'll say a waterspout sucked up fish from one of the lakes and dumped them out there. When the bones are the only thing left, we'll dispose of them, and the trail will reopen. I drove back home and went to bed.